Good evening and welcome to the Cherry Creek North Neighborhood Association. First, thank you for being here tonight. And I want to thank Councilwoman Amanda Sawyer and Jamie for being our guests. And you'll learn more about them as we progress. But before we get started, I wanted to do a few announcements that you received in your mailbox from our newsletter, because we have some upcoming events that are so exciting and brings our neighbors together. So the first one is a lecture series on June 26th, and it's called Millennial Apocalypse by Zane Brown. And here's kind of the teaser right at the beginning of the book. Why you and other millennials are tracking towards financial disaster, and the punchline, how you can avoid it. So look around at all the millennials in the room. This lecture will be perfect for us. Okay, bring all your friends, kids. All right, second lecture that's coming up, we have, don't have a date for it yet because it'll be from Jeff Bernards, who set up all of our audio tonight, so thanks, Jeff, for doing that. He's going to be talking about AI, not, well, I never go there right. And he will speak about the future applications of AI and its impact on our daily life. So stay tuned, watch our Facebook, our Instagram, our e-blast, and that will give you more information about his talk on AI and the date. So tonight, this presentation will really be in three parts. The beginning, Jamie's going to do a PowerPoint with a fairly intensive overview of the JIT. And then she's going to have you use your phones and take an online survey that you will see the results immediately with your fingers and toes crossed that we don't blow the internet in a school. And then part three, we're going to have all your questions and answers. So the majority of our time tonight will be for you and your questions. And we're going to ask Kate and Lou, they're going to be on those very colorful orange stools. So if you have a question, we're going to ask you to go to them. And the reason we're doing that is so we can record it when we upload the video of tonight's presentation. So it is my pleasure tonight to introduce you to Councilwoman Amanda Sawyer. She's a Colorado attorney. She has a master's in business administration, years of experience in marketing sales, in entrepreneurship, and business strategy. In her first year as a councilwoman in 2019, she focused on 4 key values, and I think they're critical for our discussion tonight. Transparency, accountability, customer service, and effective communication. To me, she's met those goals as she continually outreaches to our community and addresses the concerns that we have in our neighborhood. Please welcome Councilwoman Amanda Sawyer.
Well, should I stand up so those of you in the back can see me? Can everyone hear? Yes. Great, okay. It's great to see everyone. Thank you so much for having us tonight. I am going to actually speak very little until we get to the Q&A portion of the conversation. But I want to just give you a little bit of background about what we're doing here, why we're having this conversation. So many of you know in 2023, redistricting happened, and that meant that I had the honor of taking over Cherry Creek as part of Council District 5, which is, like I said, my honor, but I didn't know you, right? And so I sent out a survey to the community to ask what you wanted to see. And what I heard back in that survey was really interesting information about the things residents want to see that are really services that are above and beyond the core services that the city will provide. And so I started thinking, how could we get you what you say you want? And the answer is to potentially create a general improvement district. So we are very early in the process. We're here tonight to hear from you. What are your questions? What are your concerns? But before we get started with that, we're going to do a presentation just to make sure everyone understands the kind of basic framework of like what is a JID, how does it work, what would it do, etc. I want to be very clear, we are in the feasibility study phase, which is the earliest phase, where we are asking you, what do you really want to see and what are you willing to pay for, right? And if the answer to that is nothing, that is okay, 100%. But we want to hear that now so that we kind of understand, is this something that you as residents want to move forward with, or is this something you don't want to move forward with? And if it isn't, that's okay. But if it is, great, then we'll start that process in September. So I am not an expert at this at all. And so if there's one thing I know how to do, it is ask for help when I am in over my head. So our office has hired Jamie Gillis, who is an expert in JID creation. She has worked all over the country and all over the world creating and working with special districts and citywide plans and all of those different kinds of things. So I am going to turn it over to Jamie to introduce herself and take us through the presentation.
Great, thank you, Amanda. And Linda, can I get my slide support? I know you've been busy prepping everything else. Well, thank you so much. It's great to see so many faces. I do a lot of community engagement. I know Amanda does too. And you never know how many people are going to show up, but it's much more interesting to talk and present to a group of interested citizens. So I'm excited to share with you a little bit about what a general improvement district, or a JID, as we call it, is. As Amanda said, I'm just here as sort of the guide or the shepherd in district formation processes. I've done over 75 special districts. I'll talk about a few here in Denver you may be familiar with. And I just help community navigate the process. Community makes the decisions, community decides and votes if they want to do it. So my goal here tonight is really just to educate you on the tool, how it can work for you, should you choose to continue exploring it, and what that process looks like. So, next slide. So we're going to cover a lot of territory tonight. We're going to talk a little bit about what a general improvement district is. We're going to talk, carrying on from what Amanda mentioned, how we got to this process and this conversation tonight. What kind of things can a JID do? We'll share some examples, as I mentioned, of other districts. We're also going to answer that most important question of what is it actually going to cost, and how much money can you actually generate, and how far can that money go, possibly. We'll talk about the process in terms of how decisions get made on how JID funds get spent. And we'll talk about the relationship between special districts and the city, and what that partnership looks like once a special district is formed. And then, as you mentioned, we'll have plenty of time for questions as well. Next slide. So we're going to start with what is a general improvement district. And I'm sorry, the sun just happens to be hitting the slide exactly in the rough spot. But next slide, please, Linda. So how many of you have heard of a general improvement district before, by show of hands? Oh, good, fair amount. And I'm sure many of you are familiar with its sister district, which is called a business improvement district, because of the wonderful Cherry Creek North Business Improvement District and all the investments that it has made. So BIDs and JIDs are almost identical, except for one key difference. Business improvement districts only include and involve commercial property owners and businesses, and they only assess commercial property owners and businesses. So even if you're a resident that lives within a BID, you're not paying into the BID. JIDs assess both commercial and residential. And so commercial and residential property owners participate in the formation. They participate in the decision-making on how funds get spent. They participate in the board and in the governance structure. And so in that way, JIDs are more useful when we're looking at districts or neighborhoods like Cherry Creek, where you have a mix of uses all intertwined together. They are enabled by state statute, so we follow state law when we create a district. And they're essentially created by city council ordinance, which authorizes a special election of you all who get to vote in a mail ballot election on whether to form the district. If a district is formed, it's governed by a board of you all. The city doesn't keep the money, the city doesn't dictate how the money is spent. All the money comes back to the neighborhood and is spent on neighborhood priorities according to a work plan that's developed during the formation process of a district. Districts can do just about anything you want them to do. I'm going to share some different examples of how different neighborhoods have used them. They can do safety, They can do beautification, they can do cleaning, placemaking projects, they can fund transportation projects, they can fund microtransit, all manner of things. Basically, anything you all decide you want collectively for your neighborhood, the district can fund and help facilitate. Next slide. So the big question always when we start these processes is why on earth would individuals, would community members tax themselves more? So I want to tackle that question straight on. The first thing to know about districts, and this is written into state law, is that districts can only fund enhanced services. So they cannot fund basic city services. It explicitly states in the law the city can't take away services in places where districts are formed. Districts are intended for enhanced services that the city does not fund, will not fund, cannot fund, will not ever fund, basically. Districts are often used to leverage investments that the city is making to make those investments better or to make that investment go farther or do more for the community, but in no way do they replace city services. So this is for things that you would get that the city's never gonna pay for, that collectively as a neighborhood, you have maybe I've talked over the years, you know, I wish it was safer, I wish we had flower pots on every corner, whatever your desire is. Those are things that the city won't fund, that you all have to fund it. So it's a tool for you all as a community to work together to fund those things. They also establish a unified voice for the neighborhood. So there's a lot of people. There's, I think, over 6,000 residents that live within the Cherry Creek neighborhood. And all of you, and I've heard some of you tonight talking to Amanda, I have this issue here, I have that issue here, I have this need here. And so her office works to see what the city can do. Some of those things, again, can't always be funded by the city, or sometimes you need a larger collective voice to really say, for us, it's not 72 priorities, it's these 5 priorities for the neighborhood this year and these 5 next year. And as an organization, as a district, we want to work with the city to problem solve through those things. It puts greater control of the district in your hands. You guys all get to decide how the funds are spent. So again, this is like tax dollars that come back to you that you get to dictate, not city council, not the mayor's office. And everybody pays a fair share in improving the area. This is a reason why districts were formed starting back in 1979. I think the first district was formed in the United States. And it's because neighborhood groups or downtown groups would often have these associations and everybody would pay in their dues, not everybody. 100 of the maybe 500 stakeholders would pay in their dues. And they'd make improvements to a neighborhood and everybody would receive benefit, including the 400 people that didn't contribute. So districts make it fair. The statute says whatever the district assesses, we have to be able to show in the operating plan for the district that you all are receiving value back for that investment. So whatever your investment is, we have to show the return on investment and then some for the district. And so that's a key piece of this, that everybody pays in, everybody receives benefit. And then the final thing that I think is really important is the leverage piece. So we're always looking at how do we take the, $500,000 that the district might raise and turn it into $1.5 million through grants, through city partnerships, through leveraging other city projects and things like that. And that's where districts around the country, around the world have been really successful. Next slide. So the district formation process is a long one, anywhere from 1 to 2 years from initial idea of pursuing it to actually having a district in place. And there are really 3 key steps to it. We are, as Amanda said, in the very first step, the feasibility study. And you all are here tonight to weigh in on that. This is just the very first glance at what would the neighborhood want if a JID were established here, what kind of funding would be raised, what kind of projects could you afford to do, what would the boundaries look like, what would people want in terms of governance structure. We're just doing a high-level understanding right now and really trying to test support. And this is a tricky phase because districts are a complicated tool. If you've never been a part of one before, if you've never been a part of forming one, it's not straightforward, right? You're working through state statutes, you have to go to city council, there's Tabor, it's a tax election that you have to do. So we use this phase really as an education so that you all know that there are tools in the toolbox that you can use if you want to improve your neighborhood, that you can deploy, how that process works, and what it could possibly look like for your neighborhood. And from there, you really tell us like, hey, this is kind of interesting. Maybe it's worth continuing to explore further. It's not perfect, we need to know more details. Or maybe you look at it and just go, no, I don't want any of this, I don't want anything to do with this. That's what we find out by going through the feasibility process before we jump into all the other complicated formation process. Assuming there's support for the feasibility study, then we would move forward into the formal district creation process. And that includes more engagement to build out a very detailed operating plan for how the district would work. That includes a petition process in which you all would have a chance to sign a petition to send it to City Council. And then it includes a City Council ordinance which authorizes you as a neighborhood to hold a special election to form the district. So that whole process takes 18 to 24 months. We are in the feasibility study right now. We've been listening and learning and researching since January. Tonight is actually the final big neighborhood meeting. We've had a number throughout the last several months. We're gonna, at the end of this, we have information on a survey that's going live tonight, and postcards will be mailed to every single resident and property owner within the district. And you'll have until June 15th to also weigh in on that survey based upon what you learned tonight. I will be putting together the feasibility study report. In late July, we'll have a session in which you all can hear the feasibility report findings, weigh in again, and then we'll sort of make a final determination on whether this process moves forward or not. If it does, we move forward in the business plan creation, you petition City Council, and ultimately it would end up in election in November of 2026. So we're still over a year away from the actual time when you would get to vote on it, and a lot of steps and detail to be worked out in between should you move it forward. Next slide. Okay, so how did we get there? Next slide. Amanda talked a little bit about the background of this. There's been lots of planning over the years. The Cherry Creek Area Plan in 2012 was the first plan that sort of identified priorities of the neighborhood that would best be funded with some sort of special district tool. And that's when the conversations about the general improvement district first emerged. They have been percolating on and off since then. They have come up as part of other studies that have happened. And then last year, the Councilwoman's office did a community needs survey and community needs assessment report that identified some priorities that the neighborhood had that again are things that won't be funded by the city. And so the concept of moving the JID exploration process forward was really born from that time. Next slide. So when the survey was completed, there were 3 primary buckets, I'll call them, of services that the neighborhood identified that are above and beyond city funding. The first was a safer neighborhood, and people responded with things like being able to have security patrols, like the types of security that patrol the Cherry Creek North neighborhood that the bid pays for, but having them expanded into other parts of the neighborhood, into residential parts of the neighborhood. Lighting was also mentioned, and this is not the large Excel pole lighting. This is the pedestrian scale lighting that lights up neighborhood blocks. And some have it and some don't. And some places have very old lighting that isn't functioning correctly. And so the desire to, as you walk out of Cherry Creek North on an evening after dinner, for example, where it's well lit, to not walk into the dark, to be able to have consistent lighting. And again, that is not something the city funds, right? So wherever you see that kind of decorative pedestrian scale lighting around the city, that's some sort of special district that has been funding that, or it was built into a developer mandate as part of a master development. The second is an accessible neighborhood, and there are lots of different ideas there around pedestrian and bike accessibility, as well as microtransit, the types of transit that could be a circulator around the neighborhood to move you around the Cherry Creek neighborhood, or connect Cherry Creek to other neighborhoods like downtown via microtransit. And then the third was a beautiful neighborhood. So improving the greenway, better landscaping, more public art, just general beautification, again, beyond the boundaries of the Cherry Creek North bid. Next slide. So again, just to note that this process is really intended tonight to explore the feasibility. Nothing is decided. It's very sort of big picture right now as a concept. Your feedback tonight, all the feedback we've gotten from the, 30, 40 plus meetings we've done, and the feedback from the survey will all be shared back out with you as part of the feasibility findings to really determine if this is a conversation that moves forward or that stops this summer. Next slide. So this is the study area for the General Improvement District. And I say study area because, again, nothing is fixed, right? When we start the exploration of a district, we have to start with boundaries so that we can understand what types of property ownership is there, how many residents are there, what types of projects people want, and so that we can start to run some different scenarios. But even as we've set these boundaries, we have been looking at the edges. You know, we've been having conversations with the 6th Avenue businesses and sort of seeing, is that the right line there? So all around, we've been kind of engaging with others on the edges to see if there's a desire to be part of the General Improvement District. One thing to note, you'll see that the Business Improvement District is outlined there in the middle of that. The JID, as it's envisioned now, would overlay the Business Improvement District, but it would not double assess the commercial. So again, a reminder, the commercial properties in the Business Improvement District are already paying into the bid. Those properties are the ones that are in purple. The yellow properties within the boundary are residential properties. They're not paying into the bid. So we're exploring having the residential that would pay into the JID within those boundaries. They would pay into the JID and receive services from the JID. The bid is already assessing on the commercial a fairly high mill levy, quite a bit higher than we're even exploring for the bid. And so again, that's the reason they're already paying, they're already receiving services. We don't want to double tax them. Other commercial properties within the boundary would be assessed within the General Improvement District.
Would the mall pay into this?
We'll get to questions at the end, but yes, it is in yellow.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So what exactly can we do with the General Improvement District? Next slide. I've got 3 case studies here just to share 3 very different examples of how the General Improvement District tool has been used in Denver. The first one is the Ballpark General Improvement District. This one was just formed in November of 2024 and has just gotten underway with its operations in the last few months. This special district covers the area around Coors Field and also extends in to cover all the social service provider facilities that are down in that area. And these stakeholders, which represent over 2,000 residents and hundreds of businesses, formed a district that's primarily focused on safety, homeless navigation, cleaning, and beautification in the area. So they assess 5 mills on residential and commercial property, and we'll talk about what 5 mills actually looks like in a minute. They generate about $1.3 million in their assessment revenue, and they've leveraged about another $500,000 in contributions already. The Rockies contribute to them, the social services providers contribute to them. And so they are delivering services there 7 days a week from 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. They have 22 full-time ambassadors on the ground who are doing safety, homeless navigation, and also the cleaning services. Additionally, they have 2 intergovernmental agreements set up with the City of Denver. And this is another unique part about having a special district, is you essentially become a quasi-governmental entity. You can enter into what's called an intergovernmental agreement with the city or other government agencies to establish and codify partnerships, financial relationships, all of that between those agencies. So in Ballpark's case, they have an intergovernmental with the police department. The chief of police sits on the board, comes to the board meetings. along with the lieutenant. And that partnership sets out the relationship in terms of how they're working together to share information, to address crime hotspots, and to tackle crime problems in the area. So the police haven't abdicated. If anything else, they're more focused and targeted on what they're doing. The ambassadors are collecting data 7 days a week that gets directly shared with DPD, and that gives DPD a better opportunity to drill down on some criminal areas that they've been dealing with. They also have a intergovernmental agreement with the city on homeless engagement that includes a lot of the social service agencies, and so they work together sharing data on the homeless individuals down there and navigating them to housing and or services, whatever those particular individuals need. So it's a shared partnership, again, sort of the city then focusing in more on the direct needs of the neighborhood based upon what the neighborhood is telling the city. Next slide. The next case study is the Rhino General Improvement District. This one was formed about 10 years ago, and this was more of an infrastructure-based district. So Ballpark is really service-oriented. The Rhino General Improvement District was infrastructure-based. The impetus for the Rhino General Improvement District was the reconstruction of Brighton Boulevard. Back then, Mayor Hancock had a vision, and it needed to be done to improve Brighton Boulevard, which was a pretty rough asphalt, unlit, unsafe, messy area. And so the city had committed funding to basically build a concrete street and curb and gutter. And the River North property owners came together and said, we're excited about that, but also we want sidewalks, separated bike lanes, pedestrian lighting, trees, benches, we want all those things, right? And the city said, that's great, you can pay for them. We don't pay for those things. So the Rhino stakeholders formed the district, and utilizing district funds, they took out $3 million of debt against the district, handed that to the city to augment the project, got to design the road with the city, and then the city built the improvements for them when they were building the road. And so this is an interesting one too, where, I mean, a great example of like leveraging a project to make it better and make it work for your community. The other example here is that they have kind of two different ways they assess. So the boundary that you see in the map, that is the entirety of the River North General Improvement District. Everybody in there pays 4 mills, and those funds are going towards cleaning and maintenance and some safety. They've also helped build projects. They built the River North Park, the River North Waterfront Promenade. They did improvements to 35th Street. They've done some other beautification projects around the neighborhood. So everybody in the neighborhood kind of contributes to the bigger projects that are beneficial to the whole neighborhood. In addition, for the property owners whose property touches Brighton Boulevard, where all of those investments and improvements were made, they also paid an additional linear front footage charge. So however many linear front feet they have on Brighton, they paid a fee for that. And that's basically because they didn't have to build those public improvements, which developers normally do. So instead, they paid into the district then took out the debt, paid for that. They are, through that assessment, paying off the debt. When the debt is retired, that assessment goes away. And so just another note here about, I think, 2 important things to call out. One, districts can do tax-exempt bond financing for up to 30 years. So they can do really competitive, get really competitive rates to do projects and bond against them for 30 years, so you could build a project in day 1 and pay it off over a 30-year life. The other thing that's important to note here is that districts can have different zones or areas of service where different benefits are incurred. So we've heard through our engagement with the community, well, what if Cherry Creek East wants lights and Cherry Creek North doesn't? Do we all have to pay the same rate? No. So our goal is to geographically figure out, where do people want things? Maybe there are services you all want. For example, maybe you all want security patrols, just for example. And so you're all paying evenly for that. But certain of you want different things. This area wants lights, this area wants flower pots. So we figure out those costs, and that all gets built into the work plan and divided appropriately, right? Again, back to the statute where we have to prove that you're getting the value for what you're paying for. Next slide. And then the final case study is Gateway Village General Improvement District. This is the oldest general improvement district in the city of Denver. And it's really, as you can probably see from the map on your handouts, it's a primarily residential area. And they sort of use it for maintenance, for snow removal, for greening. They do some street improvements. They have neighborhood signage that they put up. So they're using it more of like a little community association to fund some of the day-to-day things that benefit all homeowners. But as you can see, the district tool mechanism can be applied a million different ways. The statute's really very open as to what you do and how you do it, but it does require us to be accountable and transparent about how assessments are spread out over the people paying and how that governance structure and those decisions get made. Next slide. I think I sort of touched on this again. JIDs can do just about anything you want them to do. Next slide. And so let's get to the real big questions. What would a JID cost? So for those of you, hopefully you can see this slide, and hopefully most of you can have the handout in front of you. There are a lot of numbers on this slide, and so it can be very confusing to understand how you run assessments on districts. I'm just going to walk you through it step by step. The first thing we do, looking at that top box, is we look at the total assessed value of the neighborhood. And we're going to talk about the word assessed in a minute. This is not the actual value. Whenever we're doing assessments on special districts, we're using the assessed value of your property. So we look at the total assessed value. In this case, we pulled the total assessed value for that entire map you guys saw previously, but we pulled out the total assessed value of the commercial property within Cherry Creek North Bid, because again, they won't be charged, so their assessed value wouldn't be part of this. So you guys collectively, and this is based on pre-May 1 numbers, by the way, we still don't have the new tax numbers for the whole neighborhood, but it's around $655 million. To understand what that translates to in terms of a budget, we then apply different mill rates. And a mill, 1 mill, for example, is $1 per thousand on the assessed value of your property. So three mills is $3 per thousand, 4 mills is $4 per thousand, and so on. For purposes of kind of running scenarios, I've started with between 3 and 5 mills, because in my experience, that's kind of the average range when you're doing, in particular, residential districts, where the cost seems reasonable for most people, and you can still generate enough funding to actually do something. So that pink box shows you what the district would generate annually at 3, 4, and 5 mills. So that would be your budget on an annual basis. Then in order to understand what the average homeowner would actually pay, we'll look at the bottom chart. So let's start with home actual value, and you see $750,000. So for somebody that has a home whose actual value, the value that you could sell it for most likely, is $750,000, we have to get to your assessed value. And in Colorado, right? The assessed value for residential is 6.7%. And so actually, before that even happens, there's a $55,000 value reduction that happens by the assessor. So to get to your assessed value, it's $750,000 minus $55,000 times 6.7%. So somebody with a $750,000 home has an assessed value of $46,565. If we were going to charge 5 mills for the district, you would then multiply that number times 0.005. So if your home is $750,000, the annual cost to you as a resident at 5 mills would be $232.83, or 64 cents a day, to generate that 5 mil budget. For somebody with a $3 million home, they're looking at $986.58 a year, or $2.70 a day. So that's the annual cost. Hopefully that all makes sense. We'll also show you for commercial, it's quite a bit higher, because commercial is assessed 4 times higher than residential is in Colorado. So the information on the top of this slide is still the same, but looking at the commercial building value, if somebody has a commercial building valued at 2.5 million, the annual cost to them would be about 3,400, and so on and so forth. So commercial pays quite a bit more than residential or than the average resident would. Next slide. And then as I mentioned, it can even get more complex and nuanced. So we shared that Brighton Boulevard example where you can have two different types of assessment rates. The map on the left is a map of the downtown special district. That has 12 assessment zones. So the way they charge is if you're on 16th Street, you pay the most, and the farther you get away from 16th Street, you pay less. The people on 16th Street get the most value, the people as you move away get, or most service, and the people as you move away still get services but at a lesser frequency. So there's lots of different ways to slice and dice it. Next slide. All right, I think we just have a couple more. How do decisions on JID funds get made? So again, the governance and the decision making is all up to the stakeholders, the ratepayers, right? The business plan, the operating plan that's put together puts the guardrails in place for what the district can fund. So it may say, you know, can fund safety, it can fund microtransit, it can fund landscaping. So that's the first kind of protection, is that you can't get a board in there that says, but we want to fund schools, and then all of a sudden they start spending money like crazy. So the operating plan are sort of the guardrails in terms of the types of projects that can be funded. The operating plan also sets out the governance structure. So you'll have a board of directors that will be made up of people from the neighborhood, and the board will be what we call codified. So we could say, and this is just an example, that the board will always have 2 representatives from Cherry Creek North, residential representatives, and 2 residential representatives from Cherry Creek East, and 2 commercial owners and 2 businesses. So we do that so that as boards change, you don't suddenly have a huge district that's now just all run by commercial property owners, but residents are paying a big chunk of the total budget. So all of that set out, the board makes the day-to-day decisions on the budget based upon the operating plan that's formed. And in terms of how those projects are managed, that really is part of the operating plan development. Districts can hire staff, they can contract services out, they can contract with other organizations like the bid. Really, it's going to be determined by what you actually want to do with your funds. Next slide. All right. Final question, but shouldn't the city be doing this? So again, just to recap, as we started in the beginning, we're talking about basic versus enhanced services. The city continues to provide basic services, districts provide enhanced services. So these are not things per se that the city is going to do, is going to fund directly, but they may partner with you on for certain projects. Every corner of Denver anymore, and frankly most cities, are covered with districts. You may have come across them in your travels. Again, if you go to a neighborhood and it has pretty street lights or flower baskets, it has benches or unique streetscaping, if you see people out in the street in district branded uniforms, cleaning or doing things, that's all being funded by a special district. And there's loads of them around the city of different types. The final piece is leverage and focused investment. So again, I think it's important to know that districts tend to receive and benefit from the receipt of more investments and services from the city because they're focused on priorities and because the city can leverage its investment with your investment and make the money go farther, make it do better projects, make it more impactful in certain places. So there's lots of ways to partner with not only the city, but the state and others to actually bring more investment into the neighborhood via the district tool. Next slide. All right, this is sort of the final presentation slide, and then we're gonna all try this Mentimeter thing together and see if we can get it to work, where you guys get to vote and weigh in on some things. In terms of the timeline, as I mentioned at the beginning, we're right now in that feasibility study phase, which will wrap up in August. If we are moving forward, the process to develop that detailed operating plan would happen immediately after, and that would include a tremendous amount of continued community engagement as well. That would go on into the new year. Petitioning would happen probably starting in February of 2026 and go on for a few months. And then the city council process would occur in the summer of 2026. And an election would occur on election day on November 3rd. It's a mail ballot election. The people who get to vote in the election include commercial and residential property owners within the district. So this is ballot that only goes to people within the district, not the whole city. So commercial and residential property owners, and then residents who are registered to vote in the district, even if they don't own property, also get a vote, are also considered a elector via the statute. If a district is formed in November 26, then services would begin right away in January 2027. So that's sort of a general timeline for information. All right, next slide. Okay, I know there's lots of questions. We're gonna try this little Mentimeter exercise that we've been doing at all of our other forums. So I think the first thing is, if you all have a phone or some sort of digital device, you may not have normal cell service here, but I think there's a Wi-Fi called DSA Guest, right? DPS, I'm sorry. I don't know where DSA came from. DPS Guest, and you can go on it and click on that, and then if you scroll down, I think you have to accept and you'll be added to the network. And once you're on there,
Can you wait just a second, because I put DPS and it gives me a lot of choices for DPS.
yeah, sure, we can come around and help you
Yeah,
too.
why don't I walk around and help you take a look at that? Raise your hand if you need some assistance, and then I will walk around and try and help you.
Once, that's a different survey. That's for a survey that we'll talk about in a second.
Jamie, quick question before we begin, because I took this survey before, and I was very concerned that the survey was somewhat slanted, and that you had asked us what we would prefer, and you gave us four, say, answers, but it never addressed the
Yeah.
cost, so there was none of the above. It wasn't like these four things, if you have a pocket of money and you want to spend, yes, but it didn't say you want these to spend the money on. So it felt like the survey was really slanted, and it looks like this is the same survey. How are you addressing that?
So, couple things. Number one, and I have explained this in every forum. I have explained this in every forum. When we've been doing these forums, part of this is education, part of it is sort of a baseline understanding of where you are. The Mentimeter tool is just sort of a take the pulse on what's your gut reaction. We do have a survey that launches tonight that will be online through the 15th. And the survey has a question that says, I don't want to explore this, period.
But before that, because I just took it, it just asked all the same
Yeah.
questions. What do you want to see in Cherry Creek without saying none of the above? It's
I'm just asking, the questions just ask, what do you think is most important? I'm not asking you yet if you want to pay for anything. We're just trying to get a pulse neighborhood by neighborhood of what the concerns are. So you do not have to answer the Mentimeter. Again, we're just kind of trying to wrap our heads around the big picture ideas of what people think are important. And like I said, we do have a full survey online that you'll be able to take where you can just say, I'm not interested in any of this, I don't want anything more to do with this.
We'll get to the question and answer.
If you have gotten online, there's instructions up here where you can go on your web browser, go to Menti, MENTI.com. And when you get to Menti, you can enter a code, 47456523. And in just a second, you're gonna see some questions start to pop up.
Where'd the code go?
Still at the top of the screen. 47456523. Yep. All right, so it looks like you guys are getting the hang of it. This first question is not a technical part of the feasibility study, but it's a warm-up question just to make sure you all can get on and use the tool. How's everyone doing? Anybody still having issues getting on? The code is at the top. Again, if for those of you, I'll read it out slowly. 4745 6523. All right. Everybody, I feel like everybody's gone on. All right. So this is just a test question. But I love that strolling Cherry Creek North is your favorite. I also love happy hour on a patio, so I'm going to put that response.
Here, here.
All right, we're going to carry on.
Absolutely.
Okay, so it looks like we have 97 of you on, which is awesome, and 92 of you have voted. So we're going to go on to the next question. Okay, so first question. Using single words or short phrases, what investments would improve your neighborhood? So you could say lighting or more safety. And as you type them in, they'll populate on the screen, and additional words will sort of populate around it. And again, I'm not asking necessarily here what you wanted JID to fund, right? We're trying to get a sense, building off of the work that the Councilwoman's office did last year, on what are the priorities where geographically, and are there higher priorities for some things in some parts of the neighborhood than others, really?
Plus construction. Oh, okay.
So we'll let this go for just a second and see, because I know it takes a minute to type things in. Looks about, we've got 55 of the 98 people that are on that have responded, so we'll give it a couple more minutes.
Does anyone need any help working? Raise your hand. Okay, great.
So I definitely see lighting, safety, security, less construction, traffic control, parking, and none. All right, give it a couple more seconds. Looks like almost all of you have responded. All right, so the next question, of the 3 improvement areas, or those sort of buckets I talked about, which do you think, which is most important to you to address in your neighborhood? Is it safety, accessibility, or beautification? And in the next slides, we're going to kind of dive into a little bit more, like, what do you mean by safety, or what do you mean by beautification, or what do you mean by accessibility? So like about 70 of the 98 have responded, so I'll give it another 30 seconds or so. All right, well, it looks like safety is the strongest by quite a bit. So let's talk a little bit about safety. Obviously, everywhere you go, depending on what your particular experience is, safety means something different to you, what it means to feel safe. So the question here is, investments in enhanced safety can mean a lot of different things. What would your priority safety investment be? And so we've got security patrols, neighborhood or sidewalk lighting, alley lighting, security cameras, or environmental design.
Yes.
Give it about 15 more seconds. Looks like about 75 of the 98 have responded. All right, so safety patrols far and away continues to be added to. It looks like 47 for safety patrols, 14 for cameras, 13 for neighborhood and sidewalk lighting, 4 for environmental design, and 2 for alley lighting. By the way, environmental design, that's not a term everybody uses every day, but we generally use it to talk about addressing kind of the public realm. So you may walk down a street where there's like overgrown bushes and you're worried somebody could be behind them or sleeping in them. So environmental design is kind of a general term that we use in the safety side of things to address the public realm. All right, so the next question is, what would your top priority be as it relates to accessibility in the neighborhood? And again, these are things that have previously been identified in the survey. So transit circulator within the neighborhood, a transit circulator that would connect Cherry Creek to other neighborhoods, improving pedestrian safety at street crossings, improving bike accessibility, construction mitigation, creek access, and parking management in the neighborhood. Transit circulator, so there's two, yeah, like a,
Free bus.
yeah, that would move people around the neighborhood so you could park, or you could go from your neighborhood and go to Cherry Creek. The question, I think, is what is construction mitigation? So that would be a term that we've used to find better ways to manage the impacts of construction on the neighborhood and the impacts of construction on traffic. Better coordination. How do you stop it? I don't think you can stop construction, but you can find ways to manage it. Manage the impacts of it, I should say. So if it's not a priority, we have heard that there are issues with the construction, the amount of it, block after block after block, and kind of backing up traffic or pedestrian access. I can't speak to the specifics of it, but I think what we're trying to find out here is where do we need to delve a little bit deeper to get more information. All right, so it looks like we've got, okay, all right, we'll speed up. Looks like parking management with 24, parking management in the neighborhood, I should say, and pedestrian safety and street crossings with 21, followed by addressing construction at 17. Where would you like to see more investments made in beautification? Greenway improvements.
The Cherry Creek Greenway.
The Cherry Creek Greenway, the water.
Bike path. The creek. Yep.
consistent and enhanced landscaping, public art, neighborhood signage, or enhanced cleaning and maintenance. All right. I think there's just one more question, and then we'll put up on the screen a little bit of information while we take Q&A. So it looks like enhanced cleaning and maintenance got 36 votes, consistent and enhanced landscaping with 16, public art with 9, gateway improvements with 7, and neighborhood signage with 3. All right, finally, and again, this is an if. If a JID were to be created, how would you want your funds allocated? Would you want 50% of your funds invested in safety, 100%, 70%, accessibility, beautification, and then other? Yeah, so that was the question. Accessibility includes things like the microtransit or improved pedestrian and street crossings or improved bike access or improved access to the Cherry Creek Trail, that sort of things. Yeah. And again, think about it like if you were to form a district, if you were paying extra money, where would you want to see most return for your money, right? Where do you want to see that money invested in? All right. I think you all can continue to vote. Again, just to recap, 55% in safety, 16 in beautification, and 15 accessibility and beautification are fighting each other. All right. Thank you very much for doing that. I'm gonna put the slide up with the information also about the survey and the public forum, and then we'll open it up for questions. So there's 2 things on here. The top QR code and the, where you see bit.ly CCJID survey, that's how you get to the full online survey that launches tonight. That's a very in-depth survey, and again, to those of you that have asked, there is absolutely not a question on there that says, I'm not interested in pursuing this any further. And so that survey will be open until June 15th. Everybody will get a postcard as well. The bottom QR code and link is for the Zoom meeting on July 22nd, where we'll review the survey results and the feasibility report. So you can register there. And again, this will be pushed out quite a bit through the Councilwoman's office as well.
Yes. Hello. There we go. You will all get a postcard that has all of this information on it as well. It went to the printer today. Look for it in your mailboxes. It's an 11x6 postcard. All right, let's do Q&A. I know that there are a lot of questions.
If you would just come up to either Kate or Lou and talk right
Yeah,
into the
great.
mic.
Just grab a microphone.
That
So-
way we have you on
so
camera
hy-
and on sound.
Hypothetically, were this to move forward and go to a vote, and if the vote were to hypothetically pass, now spin the clock ahead 5 years. And let's say the GID, is that what it is, isn't really working very well. What's the process to unring the bell?
That's a great question, very important question. Well, one thing I want to mention going in is that when the district is formed, you can set a term limit on it up front. So you can set a term limit at which time it has to go through a renewal or reauthorization process in order to continue. That's the most common way people put that sort of guardrail on it. Otherwise, there are basically the way you create it through a petition process, you can do that same process to undo it. And go to city council and ask city council for the authority to do that. City council can intervene if a district's going off the rails, if it hasn't reported financials on an annual basis. Every district has to annually report their budget and their work plan at a public hearing that the city holds, in which you can come and speak up to that. And if that doesn't happen, that is also a mechanism by which the district can be shut off. So there's a lot of accountability features built into it.
Yeah, I think we want to make sure that it's recorded so that people can.
It's on.
Yeah, okay. Hi, thank you for coming tonight, I appreciate it. So, if I'm understanding correctly, all the apartment buildings, everyone who lives in those apartment buildings gets a vote. Anyone who's a renter gets a vote.
If they are registered to vote at that
Yeah.
location. if that's
My
the
guess
case.
is that they probably are. And so, that far outnumbers the people that actually own property in the district. And so my question too around that is how many people do you need to even say, yes, I'm interested, for us to go forward? It seems to me that you need to have at least 50%, and then I'd like to know what percentage of those are renters.
Yeah, that's a great question. Jamie, do you want to explain how the formation vote works?
Yeah, so, I mean, yes, and the statute is sort of weird on the whole elector thing. I mean, that is a question that comes up a lot about the renters. But in terms of the vote, so, again, electors are people who own residential property, own commercial property, who are registered to vote in the district. They get a mail ballot, so everybody gets it's a separate mail ballot that comes out, and it's a simple majority of ballots returned get the district passed. So it's,
So you don't even need the majority. You, like,
Yes, so there has to be a majority.
no, just the ballots that are submitted.
Yes, there has to be a majority of the ballots that are submitted, 50% plus one vote of the ballots that are submitted.
Submitted.
Yes.
So you maybe only have 30% of the people submit ballots.
Yes,
And then, so you could have a decision being made by a very small percentage of people that live in a district.
yes, I think that's a totally fair concern, and that is why I will say we are very lucky. We do have an incredibly large turnout of voters in Cherry Creek, in the Cherry Creek statistical neighborhood. We are one of the highest, your precincts are some of the highest voter turnout precincts in the state of Colorado. So that is really good. It's a good point. I do think that there will be a lot of people who turn out for this. I think there's.
And I want to reiterate that the vote isn't the only formation step. There are 3 steps. There's a petition process, and then which, there's a door-to-door petition effort, right, where we get petition signatures. There's a city council process that includes a public hearing, at which folks can come forward and speak about it. And city council can determine at that point, even if the petition threshold's up and met, whether or not to authorize the district to proceed to an election. And then there's an election effort, right? And it's a get out the vote election effort with that separate mail ballot. So I will say in other districts we have very representative mix of people that vote. Homeowners are very high voters in these elections. Renters are and are not, depending on where they are. Ballpark was a very engaged voter base. Those were mostly residents. They're a very young group. They're a very engaged group down there. But I just did a district down in Colorado Springs that had a lot of homeowners and a lot of renters, and the majority of the voters were the homeowners. We had very few renters respond. So I think it just sort of depends on, to Amanda's point, what voter turnout is in each district and how engaged, different constituents are in that.
We have a question right here.
Oh, thank you. I want to talk about the surveys that have been done and are going to happen. And I want to mention that I have a master's in marketing and market research from Northwestern, which is what surveys are. I've looked at the survey online. You have over 1,000 people, about 1,000 people, responded to the survey online. In looking at some of the data, about 400 of the people don't live in Cherry Creek, wouldn't be affected by this tax, at all. And I don't know why they're even being surveyed of what they want when they're not being part of this JID. Now, in the last Zoom, you said, well, 600 people are still statistically significant, which is true. But we haven't seen what the 600 people really want. And in the last Zoom, we asked if we could see the questions that were asked of the people that were surveyed at the first survey. That was supposed to be online. I've searched for it. I've even emailed the email address that everybody sees in their packet. And I still have yet to see any of the questions. So my gut feel is that survey's biased, very biased. The survey that we just took is extremely biased. Nowhere does it say, do you want this? It just says, what do you want us to spend your money on? And then I've already taken the survey you have at the top. That's extremely biased. It's not long, it's only a few questions. And that doesn't have the question of whether you want this. It has a very confusing question at the very end after asking, I think it's 16 different things you want to spend money on. Do you want to explore the JIT or not? It doesn't say, do you want the JIT? I don't know why the surveys don't start with, do you want this JIT, or yes or no? If you do, what do you want to spend the money on? Secondly, nowhere in the survey that you have up there, and there's 100 people here, there's going to be probably 2,000 people that can take that survey. Nowhere in the survey that you have at the top does it say what the cost is. You've eliminated the cost out of the survey. So the bottom line is you're only showing benefits without the cost. And to me, it's like asking Santa Claus for presents without having to pay for them. So I don't know why the surveys are so biased to just looking at what do you want to spend the money on as opposed to do you even want this? And it seems to me additionally that this is a tax looking to find things to spend money on as opposed to finding things that we really need and then figuring out the tax. It's totally backwards. So again, I'm a market research person. I humbly say everything I've seen is completely biased. I think the results are completely biased. I don't think the results of any of the surveys should be counted, including the one that you have up there. You have time to change it and start over to ask the simple question, do we want this? And also ask this and provide homeowners, what is this going to charge? Because it's not in there.
Thank you. Yeah, so thank you for that feedback. I'm going to assume you're a no.
You are big nuts. Big nuts.
But I do think that that's...
And I think there's a lot of clapping.
Excuse me, sir. I appreciate that you had your opportunity to speak, but we have to move on so that other people can share their questions as well. I will say your questions have been asked and answered a couple of times up here. I think we were pretty clear about what the cost was per person, per business.
That's not the point.
I'm sorry.
That's not the point.
Your point has been made. So let's move on.
Okay, we're going to take another question right here.
Yeah.
Confirming what this gentleman that just spoke said. It occurred to me that during the survey, it said, do you would like this, like this, like this, like this? And none of them said none of the above.
Yes, and I think we've had that discussion, and we've been pretty clear. What we're trying to find out from you all is if you were...
No, there was not on the survey about none of the above.
That's right, it was not on the survey.
Yes, and to have a more balanced survey instead of
But
one that's
it is
predetermined and biased.
It is on the
should
survey right here.
Not really.
No, not in the survey we just took. Not in the survey we
No, and I
just
said
took.
up front, it won't be on there.
Well, then it's a biased survey.
Well,
Biased nature and biased design.
I understand, and I understand everybody's an expert at how to form districts, unless you've been doing this a long time. So I'm not trying to get that.
Okay, let's have some respect here. We have a couple other questions. If you could just hold, we have a question. A couple are already up here. We're going to take these first because I said we'd be coming.
Yes.
Thank you again for listening to everybody and being patient with everybody. But I have a question. With all the new construction and all the new tax income that the district is going to get, shouldn't the city pitch in a little bit more? Because if everybody here is concerned about safety, maybe in my mind only, but maybe in the mind of other people, one of the things that we expect from the city is to provide safety.
Yes.
So,
That's a great question.
Yes.
So yes, for those of you who couldn't hear in the back, the question was, shouldn't the city provide safety? And that's a great question, and yes. So the city does provide safety. We have police, fire, EMS services, all of those different things. But safety means different things to different people, right? So you might be walking home from the Cherry Creek Bid area that's very well lit at night, and you walk into, the Cherry Creek neighborhood, which is very dark, and that might make that what safety might mean to you is lighting, right? It might be if you are an employee at UC Health and you arrive at 5 o'clock in the morning and you park at the mall. Safety to you might be getting safely across First Avenue, right? So there's a lot of different things that safety means to different people, and I think that's kind of what we're trying to suss out is like, well, what is safety is such a big bucket. What does it really mean to you, right? The city provides safety services and will always provide those safety services. Those are core services of the city. But at the same time, there are things that people would like to see. Security patrols scored really, really highly, right? There were a lot of people who said that that's not something the city will ever pay for. So that's the kind of thing we're trying to hear from you. What would you be interested? What do you think, right? And so it's a complicated question because safety means so many different things to so many different people. I hope did that answer it? You look like you might have a follow-up.
well, my follow-up is that if the city, the police, we go every month to talk to the police, and they don't even have the force to provide traffic enforcement, maybe, they need more people.
Yeah, so the comment was, do you want more police? And I agree with you, I think that's right. But I also think that is, it's a yes and, right? Yes, we absolutely need more police, we need more traffic enforcement, we need more of those things. But also what we're talking about here is elevated services that go kind of above and beyond that standard core service that the city provides.
Next question?
Okay, can you hear me? Okay. Thank you. You made the comment that I think it was $1 million of cost could provide $1.5 million of value, and I'm just wondering what initiatives you've seen in different neighborhoods that provide the most home value appreciation.
It's a good question, just in terms of where's the return on investment from the homeowner in terms of the saleability of your home or your property. I've been asked that question in other forums, and I think it's sort of dependent on whatever particular issue is rising to the top in your neighborhood, right? So again, that's always what we're trying to suss out is what are the things that are on your guys' mind. And I use Ballpark as an example, having just finished that. But all those folks were challenged by encampments and just the feeling that the sense that people would come down once, even the Rockies told us, and families wouldn't come back, right? Because they didn't feel safe parking their car and walking 3 blocks. So addressing both the perception and reality of safety in Ballpark has been a game changer for those folks, both the owners and the residents who want to stay there but were sort of scared to keep renting, right? So even those apartment building owners have seen value in that. But I think for every neighborhood it's different, right? Rhino wanted a beautiful street and walkability. Safety wasn't an issue when that district was formed. I don't think it still really is a priority of theirs. For them, that significantly increased their property values by making that investment. So that's always the process to try to understand when you're forming a district, because there's a lot of voices in it. So understanding what your collective goals for the neighborhood are is part of that process.
Thank you. And I just have one comment. One thing that I would love to see on the survey was, for example, just on the safety piece, where it was like, do you want a patroller? Do you want street lamps? I'd love to see the numbers behind it. Like, is it 1 patroller versus 1 street lamp per block? How exactly are we comparing the costs?
Yeah, And that's all part of both the feasibility and really the operating plan study. And so when you talk about what is it going to cost, this is a process that's not, it's not like when the city comes to you per se with a vote and it's going to cost you this much. This is what you're getting and this is what we're going to charge you, vote for it or don't vote for it. I think that's the hard thing to understand in the district process is that you all decide. I don't decide, Councilwoman doesn't decide, nobody decides. And so the process of getting to 6,000 people who all have very different interests is a really complex process, right? So through that process, we always start with like, okay, most districts are charging around 5 mils. What would that generate here? That would generate $3.5 million. It would cost owners this. And then we back into it, right? And then we sort of figure out that would get you, 7-day a week, 24/7 security with 25 people on the ground, or it would get you street lights on every corner, or it could get you both. You could take out some debt and you could keep some money to fund for services. We just aren't, that nuance to it isn't there. I think we have to understand where the threshold of support is in terms of how much a resident would be willing to pay to get some of those things, and then we sort of work through it. But it's, I can give you a comparable that Ballpark's paying $1 million. They have 22 full-time people on the ground 7 days a week. It's $1 million to do that. But they're leveraging a lot of additional support from the police department and other partners who are working collectively to try to solve problems too.
Let's go to the next question.
Thank you all for coming. Councilwoman, Councilwoman, do you have any intention to ask this expert to give us some case examples of where GIDs went bad?
Yes, absolutely.
We have these, so we have the ones that went good and all the good stuff, but I'd like to hear about the parade of horribles because I have prior experience with GIDs.
Yes, great. So for those of you who couldn't hear the question, it is tell us a little bit more about the parade of horribles, right? Where has a general improvement district gone bad? And that's a great question, and I think a really totally fair one. Last night at City Council, we had a general improvement district, business improvement district, and arts district that went bad. And their 10-year renewal was what we heard last night at City Council. And in order to get that renewal, they essentially had to unwind everything that they had done over the last 10 years. And so there are separate management structures now, where it was once a joint management structure. This is the Rhino bid. You can read articles about it in the paper. The property owners there, business owners in particular, were extremely frustrated with some of the management decisions that were made and not seeing the value that they felt like they should be getting. And so absolutely, there are times that it can go bad. Again, there are guardrails in place to ensure that if that happens, it can be unwound or remanaged, just like what we did last night.
Instead of us doing our own, I can speak loudly.
Yeah, I can repeat for you.
No, I heard you. Instead of us doing our own independent research, are you willing to give us the examples of how people got hurt in a brochure like this and get that to us?
We would be more than happy to provide for you different examples of issues. I think I provided one that literally is very timely because the vote was last night. Jamie, do you have any other specific examples of where kind of a JID went really bad? Off the top of your head?
I don't off the top of my head. Most of the time, when the districts are created, people see the ballot. Even with the Rhino bid last night, there was a lot of opposition. The opposition wasn't calling for the end of the district, it was calling for a better management structure for the district and the reallocation of funds. They wanted more funds on safety, they wanted more funds on cleaning, they want more funds on business support, and they were willing to support it. So I think if structured right, to Amanda's point, those guardrails, as we always say, are there to make sure there's methods to put them back on track. And we'd be happy to share all the Rhino. There's been a lot of stuff about the Rhino thing because it's the most recent, and it's been messy. But last night was pretty amazing that a lot of people came together and sort of said, we're not all on the same page, but we trust each other enough to get it back on track.
How can I expect to receive this sharing?
Yeah, we'll put it on the website. So all of the information will be on the website. And also, sir, I am sorry I have not gotten you those questions yet. I apologize. We had our budget stuff at the end of last week and I just didn't have time to do it, but I will. For sure. Yes.
I agree with the gentleman before. We're not going to rehash that, but in the spirit of transparency, how was this all funded, and how does it continue to be funded? And related to that, for Jamie, are you the one writing the survey, since obviously if it's a no-go, your consultancy and payment ends? So can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, the council office is paying for it. So for those of you who couldn't hear in the back, the question was, how is this being funded? And the answer is the council office is paying for it. We know, but based on what we have heard from our residents, that there are things that you would like. It's our job to figure out how to get them for you. And then you get to tell us, yes, no, absolutely not, absolutely yes, all of those different things. So it's your neighborhood, it's your general improvement district, it is your priorities. And so we are just facilitating the conversation so that it can be facilitated, because it is an expensive proposition. Jamie's contracted with us only for phase 1 at this point to see, do people want to move forward with this or not? So at the end of the survey and feasibility study, so July 22nd, we will present the results of the survey and the sort of feasibility study results, and then you'll provide feedback to us. Did we miss something? Did we, is there something you want to change or something you want to do differently? And then we'll get a final study from Jamie at the end of that, and then we will decide what we want to do next, and that will be a conversation with residents.
And I'll just add to answer the rest of that question. So the survey was reviewed by a steering committee of stakeholders from Cherry Creek that's been formed to help move this forward. And the feasibility study is a very real process. I oftentimes work with neighborhoods that decide not to move forward, and then sometimes they come back later. Ballpark tried 3 times to form a district. The first 2 times didn't make it past the feasibility study, and the 3rd time took it all the way to the finish line as the idea kind of evolved. So there's no way I would force it, because the last thing I would want to do, or anybody would want to do, is move a district forward that wasn't supported and spend money on an election, all that stuff that would fail. I've never taken a district to an election that failed, or through a formation process that failed. So I would recommend stopping it if the support doesn't show that it's there, because I don't want to be a part of that process.
Last question, I'll be fast. Okay, I'll be quick. The biggest surprise of the night is that Linda let me ask a question. I said, and since we're airing our resumes, I have a PhD in quantitative finance, and I like what you're doing. I think you're gathering information, you're creating a multiple regression. For example, when you have safety, is patrols exactly what's going to be the best benefit, or is it lighting? You're going to come through with those controls. You're going to let us know. So I'm all for what you're doing. So
thank you.
Please go forward.
Thank you.
Is it working?
Yes, you can hear.
I would think that before people would want to vote for it or against it, they would want to know if it's like the 3 mil, 4 mil, or 5 mil budget. Has that already been decided? Or
No.
do we vote on that, or how does that work?
Yeah. So right now, again, it's a bit of a chicken and an egg, right? We're looking at what you could raise. We're looking at what it might cost. We're looking at what your priorities are. We're looking at what those priorities cost. We're looking at if you want to do debt. There's so many variables in the formation of this, that right now we're just kind of probing where there's interest and where there's not, or what the boundaries on that are. But eventually, before this even goes to a petition or city council or a vote, there's a full detailed business plan that's developed, and that is all done through a continued engagement process that would carry on into the fall. And all of those things would be detailed out. And we just keep refining that plan and refining that plan until people feel like their questions are answered. And then that plan is attached to the petition document, and that's what you're signing. That gets passed as an ordinance, that becomes law, that becomes, again, the guardrails. So yes, before you would be asked to sign or vote or support anything, there's a lot more information we have to get to you, which is why we start with the feasibility study and what feels sometimes like very broad, big picture questions, because we're not designing the solution, you are. And there's a lot of you to listen to. So we're doing the best we can to kind of pull together the common themes.
Hi, everyone. So I'm a long-term investor and property owner in Cherry Creek. And what I've seen over the last 25 years is property tax keeps rising. And it's rising now even though prices are plateauing. We're standing in a school where the teachers cannot afford to live. I think those were your words at some point. They cannot afford to live in the neighborhood. This would directly impact the already high property taxes. So how would you answer to the teachers?
Yeah, so great question. A couple of things. Number one, I want to be really clear. 64% of your property taxes goes to Denver Public Schools, not to the city of Denver. And so Denver Public Schools pays the teacher. Most of your property taxes goes to Denver Public Schools. So I think making sure that Denver Public Schools pays the teachers appropriately is really important. The city of Denver is a totally separate entity from Denver Public Schools. In terms of the affordable housing piece, I think that that's a great question. And we have a fantastic group of leaders in the Cherry Creek North Neighborhood Association in particular, who have worked to get development agreements with all of the different properties that are being built around here to ensure that there's deed restricted affordable housing built into those properties. So Cherry Creek West is a great example of that, right? There is also now a law that we voted on in City Council in the City of Denver 2022, I believe. It's called the Expanding Affordable Housing EHA. We refer to it as everything's an acronym. It requires that every building that is built more than 10 units in the city and county of Denver has somewhere between 8 and 12% deed restricted affordable units in the building. So there are a couple of different things that we are doing to ensure that we have additional deed restricted affordable housing built in places like Cherry Creek. So all of those developments will have deed restricted affordable housing in them.
And I just want to add to affordable housing, so housing that uses tax credits and affordable housing is not assessed as part of the district. So those people that are already in those affordable housing units and facilities, they don't get burdened by an extra tax. It's just on regular market rate housing.
But I think it's a limited number. I don't have the mic. But
Yes. Wait.
Okay, being a former teacher, I'm really worried about the timeline. We should have been out of the building 5 minutes ago. So I really want to close this out with CCNNA is involved in this for one reason and one reason only: communication. All of our emails, our Facebook, our Instagram is to share information with you so that you have the information when it comes to you for a vote. I'm sorry.
developers used to be able to buy out of the affordable housing.
That's right.
Has that changed?
There is a menu of options, but the cost to buy out of affordable housing is significantly higher, and that's why we see that developers are building the affordable units, the deed restricted affordable units in now.
Okay, please thank them for being here tonight. This is a great discussion, and thank you for coming. Your voice matters.